Welcome to my series of basketball videos where I'll be comparing various NBA greats against each other. I'm doing this because I find that a lot of the basketball videos comparing players on YouTube are too focused on the big names and sometimes compare players from different positions. Lots of people compare Jordan to LeBron and Kobe to Duncan, for example, due to their similar levels of achievements, but since those players play different positions and have different styles of play, it's not an interesting comparison. In this series, I want to do comparisons between not just more well-known players, but players from days past, in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, and the ABA as well, that most modern fans probably do not have too much knowledge about. Also, as much as possible, I want to compare players that play similar positions and/or similar play styles. To me, that's a more interesting and fruitful comparison. I'll be using 8 different metrics to judge each player. Scoring. This category will be defined by each player's career points per game, peak points per game, both regular season and playoffs, and number of scoring titles. Rebounding. This category will be defined by each player's career rebounds per game, peak rebounds per game, both regular season and playoffs, and number of rebounding titles. Passing. This category will be defined by each player's career assists per game, peak assists per game, both in regular season and playoffs, and number of assist titles. Efficiency advanced metrics. This category will be defined by each player's career true shooting percentage, PER, and win shares per 48. Reason I use true shooting percentage is because it's more fair to guards. Defense. This category will be defined by each player's all defensive selections, defensive win shares, and defensive player of the year awards. The reason I'm not using blocks, steals, or defensive box plus minus is because I want to compare the achievements of older players that modern fans might not have too much knowledge about, and players in the 1960s and early 1970s do not have these stats tracked. Awards. This category will be defined by All-Star appearances, All-NBA selections, MVPs, Finals MVPs, and championships as a top 3 player. The reason I have to count championships as a top 3 player on the team is because otherwise you'll get into the situation where, for example, Robert Horry has 7 rings and Karl Malone has 0, and it's not representative of how much better a player is if you weren't a top 3 player on that team contributing to a championship. Also, I'll be including ABA stats and awards and using them equivalent to their respective NBA stats and awards. Also, no All-NBA third team selections are included because All-NBA third teams weren't added until the late 1980s, which is unfair to older players. Playoffs. This category will be defined by how many Eastern Conference Finals or Western Conference Finals and Finals a player has been to, and how many championships they won as a top 3 player on the team. Yes, this is supplementary to the awards category because it also rewards players for making it far in the playoffs, even if they don't necessarily win at all. Totals. This category will be defined by longevity, how many total points, rebounds, assists, and win shares a player has accumulated throughout their career, and rewards a player's durability. After all, a lot of people say the best ability is availability. And of course, this is only going to be my opinion from comparing the available metrics, since I've not watched most of these players live or even been born when some of these players have been playing. And to keep it fair, I'm judging them based on how they did in their own era. There's no comparing what this NBA player played in today's era or the 1960s, none of that. It'll be strictly based on their stats and accomplishments within their own era against that era's competition, which makes the most sense to me. So I hope you guys enjoy this comparison video and hopefully learn something new from it. The 28th episode in the series looks at 2 of the greatest defensive point guards of all time, each of whom represented a franchise in their primes. Walt Frazier was an icon and symbol of the New York Knicks, a crafty scorer, clutch player, and ball thief that earned him the nickname Clyde, since he was so good at stealing the ball and was the main playmaker for their dynasty in the early 1970s. Gary Payton was a symbol of the Seattle Supersonics, a tough player who could both find easy baskets driving to the rim as much as he was a suffocating defender, earning him the nickname The Glove. Both of these players were great two-way guards in their prime, but who was greater all time? Let's find out. In the scoring category, it's actually quite close. Frazier averaged 18.9 points per game, peaking at 23.2 points per game in 1972, and raised his scoring average to 20.7 points per game in the playoffs, peaking at 24.3 points per game in 1972 as well. Payton averaged 16.3 points per game for his career, peaking at 24.2 points per game in 2000, and 14 points per game in the playoffs, peaking at 25.8 points per game also in 2000. Despite Frazier's higher career and playoffs points per game, it's actually much closer than it looks because Payton played for a longer period of time, thus lowering his scoring averages. In reality, Payton has 8 seasons averaging 20 or more points per game, while Frazier only has 6. When you look at their peaks, it's also quite close as well. Both players were known for their driving ability and their mid-range game. Frazier in particular was known for backing defenders down before hitting a mid-range turnaround jumper. Going by their offensive talent and how much their teams relied on them as their primary scorer, I'm actually going to have to call this one a tie. When it comes to rebounding, Frazier was an underrated rebounder as he averaged 5.9 rebounds per game for his career. That's higher than a lot of all-time shooting guards, peaking at an impressive 7.3 boards a game in 1973. In the playoffs, he averages a stellar 7.2 rebounds per game, peaking at 7.9 rebounds per game in 1972. Payton averages a more normal 3.9 rebounds per game for his career, peaking at 6.5 rebounds per game in 2000, and 3.7 rebounds per game in the playoffs, peaking at an impressive 8.6 rebounds per game in 2002. When you look at their rebounding, their peaks seem quite close, but Frazier was more consistent at it and may be one of the best rebounding point guards ever. Thus, I'll have to give this one to Frazier. In the playmaking category, both players were fantastic passers, both orchestrating their team's offense. Frazier averaged 6.1 assists per game, peaking at 8.2 per game in 1970, and 6.4 assists per game in the playoffs, peaking at 9.1 in 1969. Payton averaged 6.7 assists per game for his career, peaking at 9 a game in 2000, and 5.3 assists per game in the playoffs, peaking at 8.7 per game in 1997 and 2003. Although both players could be relied upon as a primary offensive weapon, don't underestimate their passing skills, as both could be pure point guards if the situation called for it. However, Payton had 9 seasons averaging over 7 assists per game, while Frazier only had 2 such seasons. So out of the two, Payton was the more prolific passer, so I will give him the edge here. In the efficiency and advanced metrics category, Frazier beats out Payton by a small margin in all 3 categories. Frazier's shot selection was generally very good, and it was rare for him to have an off night when it came to getting the ball in the hoop. He was a very efficient scorer, so I'll have to give this one to him. In the defense category, this is where both players got their nicknames. Frazier was nicknamed Clyde and was a defensive hawk, particularly off the ball, and would come to steal the ball out of nowhere. Probably only Jerry West in that era was as good at it. Payton, on the other hand, was more of an on-ball defender, smothering his matchup, giving his nickname the Glove. Both of these players made a lot of all-defensive teams, and yes, Payton has a Defensive Player of the Year, although that did not exist in Frazier's time, so I won't dock Frazier for that. Overall, I had to say that this is another category where it's too close to call, as both players were known for their incredible defense. In the awards category, although Payton has more All-Star and All-NBA selections, Frazier has more championships as a top 3 player on the team. Frazier arguably should have gotten the Finals MVP in 1970 when he had an incredible series and closed out the Game 7 with an all-time great performance of 36 points, 7 rebounds, and 19 assists. Payton has no such great performance in the Finals, as Shawn Kemp could be considered the better performer in the 1996 Finals, and his lone championship with the Heat came as a role player coming off the bench. Frazier's role in his championships was more crucial, and thus this category will have to go to him. In the playoffs category, this will again have to go to Frazier due to him having more playoff success, reaching more division finals, and winning more titles. In the longevity category, Payton played much longer than Frazier did and beats him in all categories, thus this category will easily go to him. So when all the categories are summed up, Frazier takes the rebounding, efficiency, awards, and playoffs categories, while Payton takes the passing and longevity categories, while the rest are a tie, giving Walt Frazier a decisive win. While both players were franchise players for their teams, I feel like both Frazier and Payton are a bit underappreciated in the all-time PGs discussion, probably because they're not considered top 5 point guards but more in the top 10 to 12 range, leading them to become slightly underrated. Walt Frazier was a New York icon both on and off the court, and his all-around two-way game in his era was probably only equaled or exceeded by Jerry West, leading his team to 2 titles alongside his Hall of Fame teammates Willis Reed, Dave DeBusschere, Earl Monroe, Jerry Lucas, and Bill Bradley. Gary Payton, on the other hand, played with a less stacked, albeit very solid Supersonics team with Shawn Kemp as a supporting co-star, and guarded Jordan as well as anybody could in the finals, although he never got to win a championship for Seattle in his prime. I hope you guys enjoyed this comparison. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next comparison video.